Hello and welcome to the Unit 10 Recorded Study Guide. If you have your paper study guide in front of you, you will notice throughout this that some of the terms are in different places, like in the order that I'm going to talk about them, and in the order that they're on your paper study guide. But it shouldn't be too bad to follow along. For example, we're going to talk about mountain men first, and then we'll get to land speculators like the third thing. But yeah, we're going to start with mountain men. We're looking at page 419, and it goes through 420. Basically, when we talk about mountain men, we're talking about the first people to go out west. And, you know, this whole unit is about expanding the country and expanding the nation. And, you know, this was previously the area that we would think of in the United States as the West. But now these people, these first pioneers, are going out into the Rocky Mountains and even farther, and they are finding new paths and new ways to live, and that's what they did. That they're the first people that go out there. They're known as the mountain men, the early pioneers. The reason that they are basically going out there, and the reason a lot of people do anything, is it's all centered around trying to make money. And the way that they were going to make money is they were going to trade fur, and they were going to trap animals and trade the fur back to the people in the east, use the rendezvous system, which is something that we have talked about a good amount. But yeah, the first people that went out there, mountain men, making money, trading fur. An example of one of these mountain men is a story on page 419 as well. And this guy's name is Jedediah Smith. We didn't talk too much about Jedediah Smith, but he's the One American Story at the very beginning of chapter 13, section 1. Basically, this guy goes out into the frontier, into the wilderness, into the west, and he's looking for a path through the Rocky Mountains. Well, just to kind of show you how tough and rugged like these mountain men had to be, like Jedediah Smith is just walking through the woods trying to find a path, and he gets his like face completely ripped off by a grizzly bear, and like his ears hanging off and all this kind of stuff. So he's like, somebody's got to sew in my ear. And this guy's like, I don't know if I can. And he's like, well, you have to. So he sews back on his ear. And then like 10 days later, 10 days after his grizzly bear attack where his face was ripped off by a bear, he goes back out looking for this path through the Rocky Mountains. And he finds it. So success, but except for the whole face getting ripped off thing. But yeah, that's how tough and rugged these mountain men had to be. So now we look at land speculators. We're on page 420 for this. To speculate on something means that you're going to buy it at like a really cheap price in hopes that in the future it will be worth more money. So what these land speculators are doing is that they are buying huge areas of land in hopes that later on they can sell a little bit at a time for a higher price. And you know, that's how they're going to make a lot of their money, and that's one of the lures or the attraction of the West, is making a lot of money. Not only did people trade furs, but also people tried to speculate on land. Now, once you say you're going to go out to the West to buy a little piece of land from these land speculators, how are you going to get out there? And that brings us to the three trails that we talk about in this unit, or this section, and we start with the Santa Fe Trail on page 421. The Santa Fe Trail on this picture is going to be this purple trail right through here. So it's going to go from Independence, Missouri, right here, to Santa Fe, New Mexico. The first time that this trail is traveled, it goes through the Rocky Mountains, pretty steep. You can really only take like horses and on foot and things like that. And the guy that is pioneering this trail, he's going through for the first time, is this guy William Becknell. He is also on page 421. Now, William Becknell is going from Independence to Santa Fe to trade. He's going to go out there and trade in the Mexican territory of New Mexico, and the capital, which was Santa Fe. And he makes a lot of money, so he goes back. But the problem is, the way that he went the first time around, he could only bring like horses, and he could only walk on foot, and it was really steep. So what he tries to do is he tries to find a better way to go through to Santa Fe. So he finds this Cimarron cutoff, which is this dotted purple line right through here. Now, the better thing about the Cimarron cutoff is that you can bring wagons through, and because you can bring wagons through, means that you can bring more stuff, and you make more money going to Santa Fe, because if you have more stuff to trade, you can obviously make more money. So that's one good thing. The problem with the Cimarron cutoff is that this whole area right through here is like a desert, and it is hot, and there's not any water, and they didn't completely know that. No one's like they don't have a map of this area where they can just be like, oh, well, this is where the next river is. No, they are just kind of hoping and praying that they get to water before they die. Well, they run out of water. It's hot, it's terrible, and they're crazed with thirst, but eventually they finally do make it to a river, which kind of saves their lives, and then they eventually make it to Santa Fe. Now they can trade all this and make a whole bunch of money, and now they know that they need to bring more water, or they know where they need to stock up on water, or whatever the case may be. So now, hundreds of families travel through the Santa Fe Trail to get down to Santa Fe, and hundreds of people go down there to try to make money. The next trail that we talk about is the Oregon Trail, and we are looking at that trail on pages 422 through 423. On this map, the Oregon Trail is going to be outlined in green. It again will start in Independence, Missouri. It travels up through the Rocky Mountains and all the way to Oregon Territory. That is. So the Oregon Trail is like one of the big famous trails. Obviously, it's like 2,000 miles long ish, a little bit shorter, and a whole bunch of people went from Independence to Oregon, and supplies were people would run out of supplies and die, and just like the computer game, if you ever played that, dying of dysentery and horrible death and crossing rivers and all this kind of adventurous stuff. The last trail that we talk about is the Mormon Trail, and the first two trails we talk about are people that are traveling out west to make money. The last trail that we talk about, the Mormon Trail, is a little different because they are looking for kind of religious freedom, and this is going to be this blue trail that starts in Illinois and goes through, follows a little bit of the Oregon Trail, and then cuts down south to Salt Lake City in Utah. The Mormon Trail, when they talk about that, you can find that on page 423 as well. So, like I said, Mormon is a religion, and these people are fleeing Illinois because they are being persecuted there, killed, and stuff like that. So they leave, and they go through here trying to find a place where they can practice their religion freely. They settle in Utah. They found Salt Lake City. That's why in Utah there's a university called BYU. BYU. That is named after the guy that led them through the Mormon Trail to Salt Lake City, which is Brigham Young, and then this is University. So BYU, Brigham Young University. It is in Utah, Provo, Utah, near Salt Lake City. So, just kind of keep all those trails straight in your head. Figure out, which one starts where, like, the Santa Fe Trail and the Oregon Trail both start in Independence, Missouri. Obviously, Santa Fe Trail ends in Santa Fe, Oregon Trail ends in Oregon. The Mormon Trail, they were traveling because they wanted religious freedom. All right, so once we, get all these people out there, they start setting up their lives there, and at this time, this isn't all the United States. Basically what we're looking at is this whole kind of area right here, that this is the United States. But this over here is soon to be Mexico. And we're going to talk about how, all these people moving out here kind of causes a lot of issues, especially in Texas. This is another part of the study guide that will be a little out of order, but not too much, just a little bit. In Texas, what we see is Americans coming into a territory that isn't controlled by the United States. It's controlled by Mexico, who is a new country after they break away from Spain. And they do just like what we did with Britain, they did with Spain, and now they're like their own country and all that kind of stuff. So they are looking for people to populate the area known as Tejas, and that is this kind of map kind of outlines kind of what we're talking about. It's this huge area, wrong color, this huge area kind of through here, and they turn to Americans to set up colonies in order to populate this area to protect it from Native Americans. And the main person that gets a lot of these people to come into, a lot of the Americans to come into Texas, is Stephen F. Austin. He's on page 428. Stephen F. Austin gets the colony from his father, Moses Austin. He sets it up and still brings people into Texas, a lot of people actually. And there are a lot of Americans living in this region of Mexico now. The Mexican president at the time is this guy down here, Santa Anna. He is on page 429. This whole situation, there's a lot of tension because the Mexican government, led by Santa Anna, is passing some laws that the Americans that are living with Stephen F. Austin don't necessarily like. One big one is the fact that they outlaw slavery, which makes a lot of the Americans very unhappy. And, everything has to be written in Spanish, which makes a lot of Americans angry there as well, because, a lot of those Americans that are living there can't read in Spanish, so they don't really know a lot of the stuff that's going on. So they don't really like the Mexican government to begin with. And there's a lot of tension coming up in, Santa Anna hears of the fact that, maybe that the Texans, the Americans, which we will refer to as Texans now, are going to revolt. Well, that makes him angry, obviously. So he does a few things. He closes the state, that area of Texas, to American immigration. Nobody new can come in. And he also requires that Texas starts paying taxes for the first time, which makes the Texans obviously even angrier. So there's all this tension, and Stephen F. Austin, who's this guy right here, goes down to Mexico City, the capital of Mexico, to talk to Santa Anna. Well, while he's there talking to Santa Anna, trying to talk him into making Texas like an independent state, but within Mexico, they'll still listen to what Mexico says and all this kind of stuff, but they can still run a lot of the things that they want to run. While he's there, he writes this letter that says, if Santa Anna doesn't give me what I want, I'll support a revolt from Mexico. Well, Santa Anna finds this letter, he reads it, he's infuriated, and he throws Stephen F. Austin in jail for a year, which makes everyone in Texas lose their minds, and the Texas Revolution begins. So there's basically, Stephen F. Austin is thrown in jail, and now Santa Anna is sending a whole bunch of troops up to Texas, and the Texans are going to organize their own army, which is going to be led by this guy right down here, Sam Houston. He's on page 429. He is going to be in charge. He's going to lead a small Texas army and against Santa Anna's troops and all this kind of stuff. So the Texans want to break away. Mexico doesn't want them to break away. And the Texas Revolution is started. Ponce Quinn is a guy that is going to be leading a small group. He's going to be helping the Texans. He's going to be leading a small group of Tejanos who will be helping the Texans in their fight against Mexico, because the Tejanos are people of Spanish heritage who don't like the Mexican government just as much as the Americans don't like the Mexican government. So they're all going to be working together to try to defeat the Mexican government. So one of the big famous battles here is the Battle of the Alamo. Texans are stationed at this, and this Battle of the Alamo can be found on page 430. The Alamo is this picture right here. It's this building, and it was an old Spanish mission, like a church. And basically the Texans are inside trying to hold the fort, and it's like a stronghold where they have weapons and they don't want to give it up and all this kind of stuff. And this battle, it's really intense. This battle goes on for 13 days, and the Texans have like 185 people, and Santa Anna has like the whole Mexican army, so they're really outnumbered. But basically what happens is on the 13th day of this battle, Santa Anna sends in 1,800 Mexican troops into the Alamo, and they basically slaughter all 180 Texans. And there are like 7 that are left that are surviving, and they surrender and all this kind of stuff, but the Mexicans just come up and they kill them anyway, which is like a big thing that's like kind of against the rules of war. Like, you don't really kill people that are surrendering. They're like going to be your prisoners. But that makes the Texans really angry when they hear about this. And the people out that aren't at the Alamo, that want, that are fighting for Texas, or that are Texans and want the Mexican government to lose, they're out there. They hear about how badly the Mexicans treated these people that surrendered and how hard the Texans fought, and they don't want that fight to those people to die in vain, and they don't want Mexico to get away with the things that they have done. And this battle cry of "Remember the Alamo" starts up, and that's why that becomes a thing. And the battle in which that really takes place, that "Remember the Alamo" attitude, remember those people that died, is the Battle of San Jacinto. And basically what has happened is Sam Houston and the Texas Army is on the retreat. They have basically had to retreat to the east. This is Sam Houston right here. So the Alamo happens right here. They win. The Mexicans win. Sam Houston is retreating. As he is retreating eastward, people are hearing about all the things that have happened at the Alamo, and people start joining in his army, because they don't want Mexico to get away with what they did at the Alamo. So in between this point right here and this point down here, the Texas Army doubles in size. So when they get to San Jacinto, they surprise attack Santa Anna. In 18 minutes, he basically loses half of his army, because the Texans have killed half of his army in 18 minutes. This battle is all outlined on page 430 and 431. It's a really quick thing. I mean, and he is forced to surrender. So the Battle of San Jacinto is where Santa Anna has to basically surrender the war, and Texas wins, and Texas is like its own thing now. They become their own, thing. They're their own country now. They break away from Mexico. They are no longer part of Mexico. They set up their own thing. They are called the Lone Star Republic. After this victory here, they set up their thing. They called the Lone Star Republic, and that's their nickname of their like new country. So Texas is like its own country, and it's separate from the United States. It's separate from Mexico. They want to become part of the United States, but the United States doesn't want to let them in because they don't want to make Mexico mad, and it's a big mess. So that's all happening, and now we're going to look at what's happening kind of with the United States itself, and how we eventually come to the decision that we are going to let Texas into the country, and the kind of effects of all of that. So the next thing on your study guide is basically kind of the whole theme of this unit, and it's Manifest Destiny. The explanation of Manifest Destiny is on page 433. This guy named John O'Sullivan is a newspaper editor, and he writes this quote and talks about the belief that the United States it's going to expand from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, so coast to coast. And it's this manifest destiny, meaning that like it's clear, it's going to happen, it's bound to happen, and there's no stopping it really. Well, when he's writing this, there is something stopping it, and it's this whole country of Mexico, and the fact that we don't control the Oregon Territory at this time either. So, the belief that this is happening is going to happen, is going to require a lot of work, and Americans want this to happen. So, when it's time to elect a president, they elect a president that wants to expand the country as well, and this would be James K. Polk. James K. Polk can be found also on page 433. When he kind of runs for office, he is supporting this idea of expanding the United States, having all of the Mexican territory and expanding up through the Oregon Territory, and he wants to go to the 54th parallel, and that's why we've talked about his slogan, 54th or fight. And that has to do with the Oregon Territory on page 434. If we look at this map of the Oregon Territory, when they would refer to the Oregon Territory, they were talking about all of this that went all the way up to the 54th parallel. Basically, if we go back up to this, the border of the United States and Canada is the 49th parallel at this time, all the way up to the Rocky Mountains, and right here. So where I drew this arrow right here is right here. So right here and right here. Okay, so Britain and the United States are both fighting over all of this Oregon Territory, and he ran on this idea of 54th or fight. We're going to get all the way up to the 54th parallel up here and have all this land and all this kind of stuff. But the problem is that if he does this, he is going to have to go to war with Britain. And what is going to happen is that the Mexican government in the South is going to get really angry when the United States accepts Texas as a state. And because Mexico's really angry, they declare war on us, and now we have to fight the Mexican government. So he has to decide, can I fight both Britain and Mexico at the same time, or do I need to settle with Britain for half of the Oregon Territory? And that's what he does. He settles for half of the Oregon Territory at the 49th parallel, and that basically just takes this border that we talked about right over here and extends it through to the Pacific Ocean, and that's the current day, modern day border of the United States. The reason that he has to settle for this, like I talked about, was the fact that the United States, have annexed Texas. Annexed meaning including Texas into the United States. This kind of process is played out on page 434. Basically, what you need to know is that Texas thinks that their border is the Rio Grande, which is this river down here, and Texas thinks that it is up in here, and that Texas thinks that they own all of this, and Mexico thinks that they own all of this. And so that means that when the United States accepts Texas as a state, they are saying that the United States now owns all of this land. Well, Mexico says, no, that's ours, and that's a big chunk of land to argue about. So, they get into a little bit of a fight, and Mexico sees this as an act of war. So Mexico sees the annexation of Texas as an act of war. James K. Polk sends John Slidell out to ask Mexico basically if they could, instead of fighting, maybe buy all of this for $30 million. They respond with a big fat no, and James K. Polk doesn't want to take that as an answer, so he sends Zachary Taylor, who is on page 435. He sends Zachary Taylor down to the Rio Grande, and he stations troops down here on the northern bank. And according to Mexico, we have just basically marched into Mexican territory, and that starts off the Mexican War, or the war with Mexico. So Zachary Taylor is a United States general who they send down there to station troops in the Rio Grande. Mexico sees this as they've crossed into Mexican territory. They start attacking, and fights break out. So the war with Mexico is basically broken up into two parts. The first part is in the northern part of the Mexican territory, and that is where we talk about this guy, Stephen Kearny. Stephen Kearny is in charge of capturing all of the New Mexican territory, which is basically this stuff up here. He goes through Kansas, goes through here, doesn't even fire like a single shot, and he takes over all this. It's because it's very sparsely populated. He's got a big army. No one's standing up to him, and he takes control of all of this. He gets to California. In California, much like in Texas, there are Americans living there, and they have also revolted against the Mexican government. They lead their own little revolt. They become a new, separate, independent state, the Republic of California, and this is this whole process of them breaking away is known as the Bear Flag Revolt, and that is on page 436. It's the Bear Flag Revolt because this is the flag they used. It had a bear on it, so it's a flag that has a bear on it, so it's a Bear Flag Revolt. This is the modern day flag of California. So within a few weeks, Mexico, or the United States, basically controls California and all of the northern part. In the south of the war, down kind of in this area, they meet a little bit more resistance, but it's still, they march in, they win, and Mexico is forced to surrender because now the United States controls basically all of this territory, all the way down even to Mexico City. So they are forced to sign a treaty to end the war, and the treaty that ends the war is the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo on page 437. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo gives up a few things. Mexico has to do a few things. They recognize that Texas is now part of the United States. They recognize that the border is going to be the Rio Grande, which is that river right there. And then they also give up this whole dark red, rust orange kind of color called the Mexican Secession. And that is on page 437 as well. The Mexican Secession is basically just a group of states that Mexico gives us, and it basically gives us all the land to the Pacific Ocean. So now we control, this whole coastline over here. So now we do go from coast to coast. We have fulfilled our manifest destiny. Things that are important about that is that now we have no one to our west to worry about. From the beginning of the 13 colonies, we'd have to worry about Native Americans or the French or the Spanish or the Mexican government or whatever. But now it's just ocean, so we don't have to worry about that. We also get a vast amount of new, good, natural resources, such as gold, which we will be talking about when we look at California. And not to mention, we just go from coast to coast. It's like a big deal. That's manifest destiny fulfilled. The last piece of the puzzle of the lower continental 48 states is the Gadsden Purchase, and it is just this tiny, tiny little piece of land right here. We buy that for $10 million. You can look at the story about the Gadsden Purchase on 437. We buy it because we need to put in a railroad, and we wanted that little piece of land, so we buy it for $10 million. And yeah, so now that we have all of this land, people start flooding to it, and a big event happens known as the California Gold Rush. And that's what we'll be looking at next. So when we look at the California Gold Rush, we're going to be focusing on page 339, and just kind of the specifics of the California Gold Rush. First of all, we now have all of the land from coast to coast, and people start kind of wanting to go out there more. It's safer to go out there. There's no other countries that are, going to be worrying about it. And so what happens is people start going out there, and in one instance in particular, in California, they find a lot of gold. And a lot of these people are coming out to the west to, make money. And in one instance in particular, a lot of people are trying to make money doing a specific thing, that is finding gold. And it all starts in this American River area, and the guy that finds the gold first is right here, James Marshall. This is on page 339 as well. So James Marshall is the first to find gold, and he finds that in the American River. And this kind of kicks off the gold rush. Now more and more people are going to be flooding into California to try their luck to find some gold. In California, there are these people known as Californios, who are like native Californians. They have lived there the whole life. They have Mexican or Spanish descent. A lot of them own a lot of land. The one that we talk about a lot is Mariano Varalho. He is on 440. He is someone we talk about just as an example of the kind of the terrible things that happened to the Californios. At the beginning of the gold rush, he has 250,000 acres. And at the end of the gold rush, because the 49ers, through this whole process, take a lot of the land and take a lot of the Californios' rights, he is only left with 300 acres. And, that's a huge decrease, obviously, you can tell. But not only does he lose his land, he loses the way that he, lives, the way that he makes money, and just all of his rights, basically. Some of the effects of the gold rush, you're going to look at this on kind of all the way through 441 through 443. There are a lot of things that go on because of the gold rush. You have to think about all of the thousands of people moving into California, the fact that it becomes a state, the fact that it upsets the balance between free and slave states because California becomes a free state. California equals free state, and that's going to upset the balance in Congress. Native Americans that lived in this area are pushed off their land, pushed off their hunting grounds, pushed off their fishing areas. You have to think about when you want to mine gold, you have to build dams of rivers, and they, divert the rivers, and it's just all horrible stuff for the fishing grounds. If you have fished there for hundreds of years and now there's no river, you can't really fish. And then, of course, the Californios lose their rights and their power and all this kind of stuff. And then on a national level, like we talked about, the effects of the gold rush are, the mass migration from east to west, and then just the fact that it throws off all of the free and slave things in Congress and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of all the terms. Let's look quickly at the B level. As always, we have basically hit on all of these questions throughout the study guide that we've talked about, but just to kind of quickly run through them a little bit. What motivated early pioneers to journey into the rugged West? What system allowed mountain men to turn this motivation into money? Basically, the motivation is that they're going to go make money by capturing furs and all this, capturing animals and then selling the fur. And the system is rendezvous system. Just kind of explain the system. It's not overly difficult. How did settlers make the difficult journey west? Talk about the three trails, talk about what supplies you would need, talk about the hardships that they faced, talk about the specifics of the trails, like where they started and where they ended and all this kind of stuff. How did American settlers cause problems in Texas? Basically, talk about the fact that they didn't like some of the laws, some of the things that they did, describe the events that led to the Texas independence from Mexico. Then you would talk about, the actual specifics about what happened in the Texas Revolution, like Stephen F. Austin getting jailed, and then the Battle of the Alamo, and then all this kind of stuff. How did belief in manifest destiny lead to friction with other countries? Well, of course, we have friction with Britain when we run into them in Oregon. We have friction with Mexico when we have a war with them. So, us wanting all the land from coast to coast, that causes some problems with the people that, have the land coast to coast already. What are some of the geographic and economic benefits of the Mexican Secession? You have the fact that we don't have anyone to our west anymore. We go all the way from coast to coast, so we don't have to worry about people colonizing in the west like we have since our birth as a nation. We also have a vast amount of natural resources now, especially gold and then timber and more fishing and easier transportation from coast to coast. Explain the events that led to fast settlement in California. Basically, you're just going to run through the entirety of the California gold rush. What impact did the gold rush have on people who lived in California? You're talking about the Native Americans, the Californios, things that have happened to them. Explain the final effects of the gold rush on California and the United States. Look at you can talk about the final effects for the people that moved out there. You can talk about the final effects of the Californios, the Native Americans, and also the fact that California becomes a state, they become a free state, and it upsets the balance between free and slave. How did Western expansion transform the nation? Well, that's kind of just you looking at this whole thing and thinking, how is the country different than it was at the beginning of this unit? How is the country different than it was when we didn't have all the land from coast to coast? So yeah, alright, so that's the B level. That's the study guide for Unit 10. Keep studying. Look over your notes some more. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. There will be a study session tonight at 7:30. Pop on, ask some questions, and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Good luck.